Hello everyone, a very good evening to all of you. I am Udumbara Subhachanani representing Japura Voice, the official talent partner of Fashionomy. I have heard that fashion is the armor to survive in reality of everyday life. So ladies and gentlemen, you are here with the third webinar of Fashionomy, the first ever ideathon on fashion technology in Sri Lanka, which is organized by the Leo Club of University of Sri Jayawardhanapura together with InnoDarts and Edscale Up. The fashion system and retail is the topic we will be discussing through this webinar. Today, we have a very special guest who will be conducting the session. She is the co-founder and the managing director of Design Collective. She is a senior regional project manager for the Daras Group, and she has more than 4 years of work experience at Daras as a project manager, as the head of cross-border, and as the head of group category fashion. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome none other than Ms. Binu Vikramasinghe. Ms. Binu, we are delighted to have you with us today. So
Hi, thank you. Yeah.
I feel privileged to welcome you to this webinar, ma'am. So before handing over the session to Ms. Binu Vikramasinghe, there are a few reminders to make. So please make sure that your microphones are muted and please switch off your cameras. So if you are having any question regarding the topic, you can put it in the chat box or you can ask them at the end of the session. Most importantly, make sure to mark your attendance in the attendance sheet, which we'll put into the chat box. So now I would like to invite Ms. Binu Vikramasinghe to conduct the session. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction. So I'm just going to say a little bit more about my background. So my education-wise, I have my undergraduate studies in fashion design from New Delhi, so NIFT New Delhi, and then I have my master's from London College of Fashion in fashion management. So that's basically in terms of just giving you perspective in terms of like what I have done before. So I'm not going to get into my work experience because I think they've discussed a lot about work experience at this point. So I'm going to now start off by discussing the topic at hand, which is basically about the fashion system and retail. This is going to be a little bit more different. I would say I'm not going to kind of give you a lengthy process discussion or anything like that. What I'm going to do is so I've been given a couple of questions or like, let's say topic ideas. So I'm going to give you a brief note on each of these topics, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions at the end of this. So starting off, first and foremost, thinking about the fashion system and retail. So how far the local industry has come, and let's say, where are we lacking or what are we doing in comparison to the international industry? So just to kind of start off that conversation, I would say, and I think everyone would agree as well, is that we as a country, we're a small country, we're an island, and also we have limited resources in terms of like, let's say we're not connected to a bigger country or anything like that, or we don't have neighboring countries, we have an ocean around us. So we do have certain types of limitations when it comes to like, let's say transportation and things like that. But even with that, we as a nation, we have a lot in terms of design, fashion, retail. We are one of the manufacturing hubs for the world. We have so much, even with limitations. That being said, so if you talk about the industry, let's say 10 years ago, we are looking at having places like House of Fashion, Hamedias, maybe Odell, maybe Emerald and few other brands, which have basically cropped up in the last couple of years. And they are the ones who dominated the industry. We didn't have, let's say, we had a very good retail base, I would say. Not very good, but a decent retail base. But now what it has kind of encompassed is like, let's say with the start of Colombo Fashion Week and the start of designers like Buddhi Batik starting off, and let's say Dimuthu and so many other brands, is that we now have a retail industry, but we also have a fashion retail industry, which is a little bit more towards the more, what do you say, couture side of things, a little bit more designer element coming into it. So we have slowly over the last 10 years, I would say since the war ended, we have basically managed to kind of go from a very small knit mass market retail unit to a more designer fashion oriented market system. So now if you look at the market system, you can basically see, so if you look at the women's wear clothing line, if you look at the mass segments, you can see like, let's say brands like Kelly Felder, G-Flock, Mimosa. You can also see brands like, let's say even Hamidias, they've basically come up with so many other things like Signature and so many other small brands. But at the same time, you see Crocodile, Emerald, you see Echo, you see Stripes and Checks. There's so many brands that have come up. Then even when you talk about, let's say, designer brands, you have the traditional ones, like, let's say, the ones who have been there for a long time, which is like Buddhi Batik, Timuttu, and brands like that. But at the same time, you have a lot of new designers, like, let's say, House of Lunali. Then there is, like, let's say, new brands like Achala, which is a brand called Lico. Some brands you probably wouldn't have even heard names of, but there's a lot of brands that have propped up in the last so many years, I would say, and that is doing quite well. There's also the other side of things, which is now, obviously there's the manufacturing side. We obviously were known to be one of the best manufacturing hubs, but now we are not only a manufacturing hub for exports, we are also a design hub. I would say that even the manufacturers are slowly kind of expanding their growth in terms of going into a more design-oriented thing, where we are not only giving Marks and Spencer manufacturing, we are also suggesting fit. We are also suggesting new technology. We are also suggesting new designs and kind of creating a market in this small country. So that's basically, I would say, the growth of what has happened in the last couple of years. And there's immense growth, more and more coming about with, like, let's say, retail stores starting up. Like, let's say now, for example, there's PR, which is a more high-end multi-branded retail store that has existed for almost 10 years. Then Design Collective is, again, let's say, in comparison to PR, I would say Design Collective is a brand that goes across the high-end market as well as, let's say, the mid-market as well. And it has over 60 brands under one roof. The same way, you have other brands like, let's say, Tribe, for example, who started off as an online base, but now also has a retail space, where again, they go across a lot of other brands. There's also Fashion Market and Urban Island, which are retail stores, but also Fashion Market is, it's actually the first one where they have a physical and a digital store, which is basically the web-based store. But at the same time, they have a physical space as well. So a phygital experience, I would say. So, you know, there's so many concepts that are coming up, and each brand and each space that's coming up is very different to one another. And there's a lot of scope, I would say, in the industry, but at the same time, there's a lot of new ventures coming up, and the expansion and the growth has been great. In terms of when we're talking about the international arena, we basically kind of, I would say, at 10 years ago, I would say, okay, we weren't even close to any international brand. But right now, I would say some of the brands that we have do have the opportunity and the capability to compete with some of these international brands. Yes, we may not have the experience and the know-how as much as what is there out there in the world, but I would say Sri Lanka is coming pretty close. And I would also say that Sri Lanka has an immense potential to basically take our craft, to take a lot of aspects in terms of design, the technical skill, and so many other things to the world. And I feel that, you know, maybe not right now, but in the next couple of years, and I'm not talking about next 10 years, I'm talking about the next 2 to 3 years, we have the potential of being a part of the international brand portfolio. So if we basically talk about, so in terms of, let's say, operation strategies. So in terms of reaching the local market, I think that there's still a lot of potential in terms of brands. So in terms of retail, I think there's a lot of brands trying to reach the local market, but I still feel that there's a lot of potential. In Colombo, you have a lot of brands, but I don't see a lot of these brands kind of penetrating towards the out of Colombo, which is, I would say Colombo is only 20% of the overall population. Like, you have so much more area, you have so much more people out of Colombo, and there's a lot of potential. But that's also where brands like Daraz have come into play, because Daraz caters to the entire, island. And they are able to kind of reach the entire island, and they're able to reach any corner, I would say. And what it has also given the opportunity is for brands to kind of look beyond. Basically, not only Daraz, any e-commerce site at the moment is kind of opening up, and they basically can now deliver to across anywhere. So in terms of retail stores, which is what our consumers are still used to, I wouldn't say at any point that out of Colombo, people are going to be okay with buying online. I wouldn't say even in Colombo, everyone's okay buying online, because we are all skeptical about buying fashion online. That's a fact. And it's something that's slowly changing and growing. We have, 2x number of SIM cards in the country. We might have so many people using, phones and things like that, but still people are hesitant to buy online. Most people would buy cash on delivery rather than prefer to put their card information and buy something online. That's how scared people are. But at the same time, over the last couple of years, I would say over the last 3 to 4 years, there has been immense improvement in the digital era. And also there's been great improvement since the COVID pandemic. It has also forced people to trust online and to take a chance on online, because there was no other option than to buy things online. So people are slowly adapting to those things. But at the same time, the brick and mortar stores, the retail physical stores, you don't see a lot of brands having. I'd be surprised that most of the brands that we see in Colombo, most of them don't have stores out of Colombo. Very few brands, I would say, have stores out of Colombo, even reaching up to places like Jaffna. So I would say that there's a lot of potential in reaching out of Colombo. Obviously, there is potential in Colombo as well, but out of Colombo, I feel that there's a lot more potential, and there's a lot more customers to grab. There's a lot more people that you can entice towards your brands out of Colombo. And it's something that you could look into as well. So now if we talk about, let's say, design versus clothing, I would say saying that, yes, this is something like, let's say, the mass market and the niche. So that's another topic that everyone kind of wants to talk when it comes to retail, because everybody kind of confuses this. So when we talk about, like, let's say brands, like, let's say Buddhi Batiks and Dimutu, then you have different brands who cater to a smaller segment of people. Let's say you even have brands like Ramona Oshini, you have Charini, you have Lovi, you have brands that cater to a smaller segment of people. Now that segment of people, they cater to one-off styles. They only have one of each design. So their price points are much higher and their design is much higher, and it's also a certain type of customer who purchases it. But when it comes to, let's say, what the industry has now come to is basically they have broken the system down to mass market. And so initially what they've done is they had broken the system into the mass market and the high-end brands. But now what they're doing is they're breaking the system down even further. They basically have the more niche brands, which is the more high-end brands. They have the mass market brands, which are the more, like, let's say, the non-branded items. It could be export rejects, or it could be, it could be so many other things. But now what they're also doing is they're creating that middle segment, which is the lower middle and the upper middle. and then obviously the middle segment. So all these segments are also coming into play, and there are different brands catering into all these segments. There are certain brands, like for example, there's companies that have basically gone into multiple brands. So there's companies like, let's say, Dilly & Carlo, who basically own Dilly & Carlo as a brand. So they break into Dilly and then Carlo Boy. And then they also have Mimosa. They also have Vanta Studio. Again, if you look at, let's say, brands like Kelly Felder, they also have the men's and the women's, but they also have certain brands, they also have certain brands that kind of go across different price brackets. The same way, let's say, places like Cool Planet also have their in-house brands that go across different segments, but they also go across different price brackets. If you talk about brands like, let's say, Hamidia's, again, same concept. They have their more high-end brands, which is like, let's say, Envoy and things like that. But at the same time, they also have other brands which are like, let's say, a little bit more towards the affordable range, which is Lee Bond and other, same sort of brands in that price bracket. So the brands, like, let's say, companies are kind of breaking down their brands to kind of cater to each of these price brackets and customer segments. So, which is also it's also a way that we are kind of segregating everybody, but at the same time catering to every single customer bracket so that, retail can expand from that point onwards. But obviously, there's still a lot of gaps, I would say, in terms of product categories in Sri Lanka. And it's also something that you can look into. LICC Jeans is a great option for jeans, but at the same time, you also have, let's say, Levi's, which is a more international brand, but at the same time, you also had G-Flock and other brands like that doing jeans options. So overall, there is, like, let's say, if you talk about the diversification of price brackets, diversification of the brand positioning, there's a lot that has come into play in the last so many years. Obviously, platforms like Colombo Fashion Week is also giving designers the opportunity to have their own brands. There's a lot of designers who are also now, since the pandemic, because of the change and the shift in the way people are thinking, the people are purchasing, they're also changing the game that they were initially going about. They're now having their main brand, which is obviously a more designer couture brand. But at the same time, they also have a brand that is a little bit more on the affordable range in comparison to those. So if we talk about the fashion growth per se, I'd say the growth has been immense over the last so many years. And it has also kind of given the opportunity for a lot of new brands to step in, like the ones I mentioned before. It has also given designers the opportunity to showcase their products, and also the platforms like, let's say, Design Collective, PR, then Tribe, so many of these platforms coming up, which also is, there's also the new venture that Otara has gone about, which is also a very interesting venture, which talks a lot about the Sri Lankanism and Sri Lankan brands. So these platforms have given the opportunity for designers and brands to have a space to retail, irrespective of if it's online or offline. So let's talk about strategy now. So when we're talking about strategy, and when we're talking a little bit more about fashion and as a brand, where do you want to take your brand, and how do you strategize and understand how to kind of develop your brand, where to target your brand? It's quite simple. You first need to watch the market. You need to see what people want. Talk to people. They're your answer. Because what I believe in at any given time, your customers are like, in retail, we anyways believe that the customer is king or queen. It doesn't matter what they say, they're always right. But at the same time, listening to them will obviously, listening to them will any day give you the answers that you want. Talk to your friends, talk to your peers, get to know first and foremost what their feedback is. Any design or any brand you want to start, irrespective of if it's fashion or otherwise, talk to your consumer. That is your key. Understand what the consumer wants, understand how to take your idea, which has to be a unique idea which has come from you, because you need to continue this brand. It can't be a copy of this one and that one. You could copy something, but you should know how to copy and make it even better. But it has to be your thing. You need to have an idea behind it. You need to have a drive behind it. You need to also know how to take this brand forward. A lot of brands and designers, they tend to come up and they crash it really fast because of the fact that they only think on the first collection. Whenever somebody comes to talk to me and wants to retail at Design Collective, I always tell them I want to see minimum 2 to 3 collections designed. I don't want the samples, but I want to see at least 2 to 3 designs, 2 to 3 collections done in paper so that I know that they have a vision to go to the future. A lot of brands, they bring their first collection and think, okay, great, I'm going to sell this first collection in 2 days, and okay, that's fine. There are brands who do that, and there are brands who do great sales, but they don't have a second collection as soon as they sell out. So they basically lose the customer base that they have gained in a couple of days. At the same time, there's the second problem where you assume that you're going to sell one collection, but sometimes you don't, and it takes a little bit of time. That doesn't mean that you run away from the problem. That means you see why it's not selling. For example, obviously, I'm not going to mention names here, but there was this one brand who was retailing at the Design Collective, and that particular brand, the photo shoot that they did at the beginning, as soon as I put it online, I knew it was not going to go with the consumers. And it didn't. The product was amazing. The finishing was really great. The fabric was really great. The concept is really great. The whole overall story of the brand was amazing. You need to have a story. You need to have a great product. Your finishing of your product needs to be great. If you don't have the technical know-how, get a person who knows the technicalities. You need a pattern maker for fashion. You need somebody with even the stitching technicalities to get it right. This particular brand, in our guidance, basically did a second shoot of the same product. And true to the word, they sold out within a span of 1 month. Now, they don't put out any collection without the best of the best photo shoot, and they sell, and it works. So they've been doing it for the last so many months, and it didn't sell, like even 1-2 items weren't selling. But as soon as they changed the way that they were presenting their brand, the whole game changed. So in terms of strategy, I'm giving you a few things. One is basically, so from the things that I've spoken about, one is talk to your customers, because that person who's going to eventually buy your product is the person that you should be designing this for. But that doesn't mean that you lose yourself just to cater to what the customer wants. You need to see how you can tweak your idea to cater to the customer. Doesn't mean that you come up with only what the customer wants. It also means how do you innovate and bring something to the table that is yours to the customer. So obviously the look and feel of the brand is important. A story for the brand is important. You need to kind of know your target audience, but at the same time, you also need to build the brand. You need to have a good name. You need to think about your brand name. You need to think about, okay, this particular brand name, can people pronounce it easily? Can people remember it easily? Is it something that people are going to remember? If I have to print it on paper, will it be really long? Will it be short? Will it be, will it show properly? There are certain logos that people can't even see. If it's printed on, let's say, a newspaper, or for example, you're sponsoring an event and your logo can't be seen. You need to think in advance, saying how eye-catching is your brand? How fast can somebody see your brand? How can you make a person remember your brand? It can be your brand name, it can be your logo, it can be maybe the catchphrase. A lot of brands, the mass market brands, how they market it is through the catchphrase. Like, let's say every single brand will have their own catchphrase. So think of, like, especially if you're going for a mass market brand, you need to always think saying that, okay, do we have brands that, what is that word that will make customers want to remember us? So that is what you need to think. Then we have to talk about, so you have the branding, you have, let's say, understanding your customers, you also have, how you portray your brand. Then I'm going on to another topic, which is about how brands and, how to basically make a brand needed by people. How do you get the brand out to the people? So in terms of, the traditional marketing methods, yes, you have billboards, you have magazines, you have newspapers, you have TV, you have so many things like that. But if we really ask the proper questions, how many of us, okay, I can still understand billboards to an extent. I can still understand that. How many of us actually watch TV? A lot. So I would say now, with all these new channels and everything coming up, how many people, especially if you're catering to a Colombo market, how many people really watch TV? But at the same time, if you're looking at catering to the mass, you definitely need it. So you need to think, where are you positioning yourself? The positioning factor will basically help you in terms of understanding what market segment, what marketing channels you should use. You should basically, of course, have any, let's say you need to have your social media. You need to have Facebook, you need to have Instagram. And if you want, you can even have Twitter, TikTok. So I would say Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook are 3 channels that are very, very important. In addition to this, depending on the type of brand that you are going to create, you can also think about, let's say, having a blog for your brand. You can also think about having a e-commerce site. You can also think about, like, going to the more offline methods of, let's say, newspapers, billboards. You can basically kind of expand your horizon from that point into the more offline segment, where you have stand-up banners at different locations and so on and so forth. There's a lot of marketing channels now in comparison to before that you can make use of. But even when it comes to, let's say, out of Colombo, you should always have your social media marketing on point. Because even people who are out of Colombo are very, very, very much in line with, let's say, either Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. TikTok. I keep always making that mistake. So TikTok is something that is new, and it's only for the new generation for sure. But it's an interesting way of getting certain things out. And of course, Instagram and Facebook. Facebook came to its maturity at some point. Instagram is slowly reaching that maturity. And also, you have to think that Instagram and Facebook give you the option of having a store. So you can actually retail things on that itself. As long as you have a website as well, you can definitely do it. A lot of people don't understand the importance of a website for a brand, but actually e-commerce is the new thing. And it's also slowly expanding, and there's a lot of scope in e-commerce. There's a lot of potential in e-commerce as long as you do it properly. At the moment, because we don't have the know-how and there's a lot of learning that we need to do, there's a lot of e-commerce help guides, and there's a lot of people who are kind of doing the adverts for you and all that. There's a lot of people who can, come as an external consultant to help you out. But it is fully worth the effort because it actually helps to grow the brand. Spending money, lots of people say spend money on Facebook and Instagram to boost posts and things like that. Honestly, I don't really believe so much in that, unless and until you have hired somebody to actually who specializes in this to do that. Because it is not easy. It's not an easy task to take it on you if you're doing your own brand to do your marketing. Another aspect is, now we've talked about all these other aspects. One of the most important things that I always say is you can become any designer. You can have any brand that you want, but If you don't have a sustaining business, you are going to have nothing. So finance is one of the most crucial aspects. This is something that you need to do a projection for. This is something that, irrespective of how small or big your company is, you need to see, do you have enough money with you to last the next 12 months, at least 6 months? So minimum 6 to 12 months is your target to have enough money to kind of run your business without making any profit. So I wouldn't say any profits. You'll be making money, but you'll be reinvesting every single penny. So you need to make sure that you have enough capital to go ahead and do this. And then from that point onwards, you need to also put targets for yourself. You need to say, month 1, you need to sell this many pieces, month 2, this many, month 3, this many. Every month you should do a review. Every quarter you should do a review. Every 6 months you should do a review. Every year you should do a review. You need to have targets for yourself, irrespective of your brand started yesterday or your brand started 1 year, 10 years ago. You need to have targets. You need to have a target that you want to reach by the end of the year and how much money you want to make. How many pieces do you want to sell? Because that is what's going to help you to understand how much quantity you need to produce. At the same time, you need to also see, okay, how many things do you think I'll realistically sell? See your past data. See how much sales you have done in the first 2 months or the first 6 months or whatever. Analyze your data every month. Analyze, even if it's 5 pieces that you sold, what are those 5 pieces? What are the sizes you sold? What are the jewelry you sold? What did you sell? What did you not sell? What is left in your inventory? See how many things have sold. See what sizes are moving. Make sure that you replenish those sizes. See what is the most fastest moving size. What is the fastest moving color, print, pattern. Watch your market. Watch and see how people are purchasing. Also see how people are adapting to your brand. Listen to feedback. At every single point, you need to listen to feedback. You need to see what people are saying about the brand. If by any chance they're commenting about fit or they're commenting about the way a garment fits on them, the garment feel, the fabric, take all that feedback. That doesn't mean that you change, like just because one customer said that the fit is not okay, that doesn't mean you change anything. You have to listen to these things and then maybe do your own sampling, the testing and things like that and see. You need to make sure that your technicals are good. So your finance side of things in terms of projections, in terms of analysis, in terms of like, let's say having a proper proposal, a proper strategy plan is very important. Putting your strategies in place is super, super, super important. And note it down. You might think it's a small business. Why do we need to do this? It's all in my head. No, it's not in your head. You need to have clear-cut goals that you need to achieve every 3 months. You need to know exactly where you want to be. When do you want to open your first retail store? If you don't want to open your first retail store, then what do you want to do? Do you want to do your own e-commerce? Do you want to like sell on Facebook or wherever you want to sell? You need to first decide what are the places that you want to retail and how much do you hope to do? Where do you want to be in 6 months? How many channels do you want to retail in 6 months? And what all things are you going to do? So I would say in terms of strategy, these are the aspects that you should be looking into. So moving on to the next segment about the local and global background in terms of retail. Overseas, let's take a country like India because it's right next door to us. Huge population. What sells there doesn't necessarily sell here, but there is a certain amount of it that sells here. The retail arena there is very different. They have a lot of stores, there's a lot of consumers, there's a lot of ethnic wear being sold. Pakistan is also a very similar market to that. But if you look a little bit more to the other side, where it's Singapore and Malaysia, they're looking for a little bit more of, let's say, batik and a little bit more innovative stuff, but at the same time, they're looking for designer garments. So if you are catering to a more global aspect of things, and if you're looking at Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, or if you're looking at the UK, Europe, US, maybe like, let's say Japan, China, just think of what each of these countries are looking for. They are, in terms of the retail arena in these countries, obviously they function very different. Now, if you think about London, they have the high street brands, they have the more couture brands, they also have the more nominal brands like Primark. So you have like different segments again going across, but also they have a large community of people purchasing it. While in Sri Lanka, we are yet to kind of go into that global arena, but there are certain brands who are getting it. But there's a lot of scope for Sri Lankans to go global. We always think, okay, let's go from Colombo to outer Colombo. No, that's not where you stop. You go from Colombo to outer Colombo and then you go global. Like you figure out how to go global. You always spend a little bit of money to attract these consumers. Figure out, let's say maybe you should do a pop-up or something like that to get your brand out initially. And then maybe, have an e-commerce that caters to them, have marketing campaigns, do things to interact with the global arena. Obviously, overseas, the global market is a little bit of a mature market in comparison to us. There's a lot of learning from those markets that you can take, and there's a lot of reading that you can do about those markets. But at the same time, we have a lot of potential. We have craft, we have batik, we have tie and dye, we have so many things, even Biralu and crochet and things like that. We have so many things that we can actually take to that market. And believe me, they appreciate those things and they're very, very, very appreciative of it. And they also like the color, the vibrance, the fact that we're a tropical country. They like all those things. And there's a lot of potential for us in those markets. But of course, the global market is a place that will take time. It's not something that we're going to reach in overnight. But it's small strides that will make Sri Lanka a bigger place, and it's a small stride that will make us a global platform. So if we are now going to talk about, let's say, I would like to now talk a little bit more about the digital transformation and like, let's say, the use of fashion in technology perspective. So you can talk about, let's say, of course, Daraz is a great option here because, there's a lot that Daraz has done in the last couple of years in terms of giving a platform for sellers to sell on, but at the same time, the kind of technology it has. You can run campaigns, you can reach so many people. The same way e-commerce has expanded in such a way, and there's so many websites. Like if you go on ASOS or New Look or any of these brands overseas, they have options where you can put your height, weight, and measurements, and they will tell you exactly what size you are. They've come to a stage where the technology and the know-how is so good that you can do that. Not that these things can't be done in Sri Lanka, you can, but it's just that very few brands have explored those areas, and there's a lot of potential with that. And there's also a lot of potential in terms of retailing overall online. Yes, there is a consumer base that is scared of it, but there is also a consumer base that's slowly adapting. At the Design Collective, we have done few campaigns during the month of October, November, and December, which was 100% online. And believe me, there were customers who came to the store, sat on our sofa, and bought things sitting on the sofa. And then, of course, we packed it within a day and gave it to them by hand because they did not understand the concept of the product being delivered. And it's a learning process, and people want to touch and feel the product. But now the same customers who during December sat and purchased on their phones and then picked up their delivery at the store, now without an issue, they know the fit of that particular brand, they buy it online. They don't come to the store anymore, they buy all their products online. We have forced customers to adapt to the digital age. The same way, there are customers who come through Instagram and Facebook and all that, where we do conversion. But at the same time, we are also giving them the website link and telling them to purchase online. We're encouraging them to purchase online. We're also encouraging them to purchase online and collect at the store. So they have that option as well. So there's a lot of options that online gives you, and there's a lot of options that it kind of encompasses them to kind of grab onto. There's a lot of customers who come to the store now. They basically look at everything that's available from a brand on the website, and then they come to the store. They look at everything from Instagram or any social media platform, and only when they see something they like is when they come to the store. There's a group of customers like that. But since the time we started the website, everyone's like, as soon as we say new brand launch, the first thing, the messages that I get is saying, okay, can you give me the link to this particular brand? And everybody checks the brand online, and then they come to the store or they purchase it online. It's a different sort of, I would say, after the pandemic, we're looking at a different sort of market. And it's also time for us to change with the trends, even if it's to sell on Facebook and Instagram, or if it's to sell via WhatsApp, or if it's to sell via our e-commerce site, or to sell through a third-party e-commerce. Technically, Design Collective is a house of brands, right? We have multiple brands. We have over 60 brands under one roof, and we have 2 stores. And these brands are on our website, and we are giving the customers 60 brands to choose from. So they have variety, and customers like variety. So the same way, irrespective of you're a multi-brand store, irrespective of you're a singular store, you're selling wherever or how many platforms you're selling across. It is still a digitized age where people are slowly adapting, and it is the new world. And especially if you want to move on to a more global arena, you have to be with the digital times. You need to get into all the platforms. Yes, it does take time. You need graphic design. A lot of the marketing students who come to me who want to do digital marketing, or they want to be a part of the marketing team at Design Collective, one of the biggest issues that I've faced is the fact that they don't know graphic design. I don't need them to know amazing graphic design, but the basics is something that is important. At least over a period of time, you need to know, okay, these are the options that you have in graphic design. You know, it really does help to kind of take things forward. So talking a little bit more about, like, let's say, the customers, I would say in terms of the customers, of course, the customers this country has gone through 2 catastrophes, I would say. One being the Easter Sunday attacks, and the second would be the pandemic. So the pandemic obviously being a global issue. So what would happen with these 2 is that customers have changed the way that they look at things. The amount of money they spend, the kind of silhouettes they wear, to the kind of outlook they have towards things, the colors that they like. Everything went through a massive change. Everything changed so fast that the retailers didn't have time to breathe before they've changed. But at the same time, they've also changed from the time that we were selling things in December. We have again changed by March, because now everyone's like, okay, the vaccine has come, we're okay, let's now get out again. And they're thinking about Aurudu, and like, this is the first time, like, you know, that in 2 years, April has been a little bit more like different for them. So consumers are changing so fast these days, and it's also because of the digital era, because of the fact that they have more information, they have more things to see, they have more brands coming up, and every single day you will see new brands coming up. But at the same time, if you know the gap in the market, there's so much potential, and finding that gap is super important, finding that product category. So the digital era and the consumers is somebody who you really need to kind of follow. So in terms of, like, let's say, if I talk a little bit more about digital marketing, something that I've understood is that it is very important, I would say, to have a little bit more the voice of the brand in terms of people want to know who the brand is. If it is a mass market brand and you are not necessarily the person behind that brand, they still want to know a personality. They either want to know a model who's associated with the brand is how people started. But now, so many brands, the owners itself, they're kind of taking part in these brands. They're kind of like, they want to know the personality behind the brand. They want to know who is behind the brand. Is this person a normal person? Can we relate to this person? Is this person fat, thin, tall? What does this person look like? The way that the brand speaks to the consumers is very important. The person behind the brand is only one aspect of it, but the story behind the brand, does it relate to the consumers? Can it relate to the masses, or is it more a niche brand? Do people understand sustainable brands? What does sustainability mean? What does fashion revolution mean? What do these brands encompass? Are they like, does sustainable mean that it's sustainable as a business, or does sustainable mean that they use eco-friendly products? What are the different areas of sustainability? So there's a lot of themes and concepts that you kind of think about when it comes to these things, that you, like, there's a lot of areas to think about. You need to think, what does this brand voice out? So one aspect obviously is the, owner of the brand, but at the other same side, what is the brand itself voicing? There's so many concepts. There's upcycle, recycle. There's, different types of approvers, like, let's say, fair trade approved. There's, of course, the PETA, like, let's say, animal cruelty free brands. There's so many aspects that come into a brand. Is it just a general brand that is more mass market? Are they using a specific fabric? Like, for example, you have so many brands that are now using linen as a base. So you have Tropic of Linen, you have Linen and Life, you have, I think there's one called Linen Atelier. So there's so many brands that are more fabric focused. So the same way, do you want your brand to be like that? What does your brand voice out? How does your brand represent? How do you represent your brand? How does this brand represent to customers? So those are things also that you need to think about when you're thinking about fashion and brands, and how you want to build this particular one. In terms of customers, like I said at the beginning, customers are everything. The same way when you're starting a brand, the same way you're selling a product to the brand, customers are your key. You need your customers to come back to you at every single step. You need your customers to come back to you, and the strongest mode of marketing is word of mouth. How much ever everyone might say differently, it is word of mouth. You need to think, how do I get the message across to these customers? And how do I get these customers to keep coming back? And also, how do I get these customers to keep purchasing my products again and again, irrespective of what channel they're purchasing through? How do I get them to come back? How do I get them to go home and tell their family about me? How do I get them to go back and call all their friends up and say, oh, I got this amazing deal, or I got this amazing fabric, or I got this amazing dress or shirt? How do you get your customers to do that? How do you entice your customers to keep coming back to you? Do you give them a present? Do you give them a discount? Do you give them, let's say, great customer service when they come to the store? If it's, let's say, on Instagram, do you talk to them nicely? Do you interact with them nicely? Do you go the extra mile to help them? If a lot of customers come to you on Instagram saying, I'm not sure what free size means, which is correct, because we as retailers, sometimes we use the word free size. It could be something that's free size from UK 6 to 8. It could be a free size, but you need to explain yourself also. And you have to also be very humble when you're dealing with customers. they will always come to you and say, I want to exchange something. You have to obviously be strict and say, my exchange policy is this. But at the same time, you need to listen to your customers and see if you can help the customers. If you can help the customers, you should always try to help them, because that will go a long way. They will tell this to 10 other people, their amazing experience that they had, but these customers will come back to you. And when they come back to you, it is very important for you to retain them. Retaining customers is very key. And that is why I said initially also, when you're planning a brand, don't have one collection, have 2 to 3 collections ready, because if you build a gap between your first collection and second collection, you will lose customers. Customers are going to think that you're not consistent and they're not going to come back to you. Because customers, when they get hooked onto a brand, they like coming back to you. The same way you like, let's say, Coca-Cola or some crazy drink that you want to keep going back to, it's a bit like that. When it comes to, irrespective of what industry it is, if you like a bar of soap or a specific food item, you keep going back to it and you have repeat customers from the same brand, or a restaurant for that matter. The same way, fashion works the same way. You need amazing reviews. You need to be able to, engage with your customers. You need to be able to get these customers to come back to you, and also you need them to talk about you. So I've already spoken a little bit about, like, let's say, social media. But something that I need to mention is that when we talk about social media, we've now moved on from the stage where just posting pictures. We have now moved on to a stage in our lives where it's more about interactive images. You need to have small clips, 10-second videos, 5-second videos. It could even be pictures, but moving pictures. Have options for people to see. People like to see variety. Give them options. And also, like, interactive posts where you can ask the customers what they like, what they don't like. There's a lot of brands that kind of do these things. So that's pretty much what I want to sum it up with. And I'm happy to take any questions that y'all have, or anything that y'all want to discuss with me about.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
So thank you so much, Ms. Binu, for the wonderful discussion on the topic fashion system and retail. I'm sure all present here today were able to secure an informative knowledge related to fashion industry, like the expansion of different brands over the time, the position holds by the Sri Lankan fashion industry when it comes to the international level, when brands positioning, what can be identified as newest developments of fashion industry in Sri Lanka, where to target your brand, and what are the strategies, like many more. So thank you so much for that stimulating discussion. So before moving on to the Q&A session, let me brief you what Fashionomy is all about. So basically, Fashionomy is the first ever ideathon related to fashion industry in Sri Lanka. So to those who are willing to participate in the competition, what an existing issue related to the fashion industry in Sri Lanka, and you have to come up with a solution which is innovative, creative, and which is unique. You have to submit it as a proposal. So this Fashionomy competition is open for all the undergraduates of both state and private sector universities, and all the students of higher educational institutions. So the deadline for the registration will be on 10th of April. So if you have not registered yourself yet, please do register yourself before it's too late. Grab this great opportunity. So the registration links will put into the chat box. Please make sure to check it out. So now let's move on to the Q&A session. If you have any doubt or a question, as I mentioned earlier, you can either use the chat box or you can unmute your microphones and ask the question. That's a question, Ms. Binu.
Okay.
The question is, we have seen many products that are sold online which are completely different in reality when compared to the images that are used in marketing it. So are there any regulations? Are there any regulations or laws relating to these scenarios?
Yes and no. So this has come quite a bit working in e-commerce. So with fashion, you have few problems. One is how much ever you sometimes photograph it to the best of its abilities, depending on the fabric texture, it doesn't necessarily look the same. So there is a certain amount of deviation. So I wouldn't say that there's rules and regulations at this point, but it is something that is being conducted. There's a lot of the brands take returns. If by any chance you tell them that you changed your mind or you say that the color is not what you expected, then they do take a return. In terms of rules and regulations, unfortunately, there's nothing at the moment, but there are consumer court related rules and regulations because you can't fool a customer. You can't show one thing and give something else. But if it is a shade difference or if it is something like that, then that's a different story. But you can't, like, if you take it to consumer court at any given point, if you take it to consumer court, they will take action against that particular business or company. I think during the pandemic, there was a lot of companies who had problems with consumer court. There is, I would say, a certain amount of guidance that the consumer court gives you. But yeah, with fashion, there, unfortunately or fortunately, there is a little bit of a deviation that does happen. I hope that answers your question, or if there's any further clarifications, I'm happy to answer.
I hope it's clear, Ms. Binu. So are there any questions? There's another question, Ms. Binu.
Okay.
Are there any way a customer can ensure their safety when buying online?
So again, tricky question. But what you need to make sure is that first and foremost, you need to make sure that the link is accurate. You need to go to that Instagram profile and you need to make sure that the link that you are going through is accurate. And also another thing that you need to make sure is that if by any chance, like something doesn't work in one go or it doesn't look the same, just don't go ahead with that. Rather, write to the brand and say, take a screenshot of that particular page and ask them, is this a proper system? But also don't go to purchase from unknown websites, or don't go to, like, never give your card information to anybody. Never like physically give your card information to anybody. Never give your bank account details or anything like that to anyone. You have to always make sure that you never ever give any of that information. And the most important thing is that you need to double check with the brand saying that, is this your own website? Try as much as possible to use the link that is on their own Instagram, like the Instagram that is constantly updated. Like, it shouldn't be an Instagram that hasn't been updated for a year or so. It should be an Instagram that is updated at least weekly, so that you know for a fact that this is a legit account as well. And also make sure to have a conversation. If you're still not sure, don't go ahead with it. Give them a call over the phone and do that, because there is a certain amount of fraud. But at the same time, the most of the, like, you can also kind of familiarize yourself with the payment gateway options that are available, because most companies use payment gateways. If either it's from a bank or otherwise it's Pay Here or WebEx Pay, there are payment gateway options that they use. So see if it's one of those payment gateways, see if it's a bank that they're using. If by any chance, if it is something that you don't identify as a proper payment gateway or a bank, then don't go ahead with it as well. Because there's no yes, there is regulations about it. There are ways that you can kind of put this into fraud and things like that, but it's a long process. So it really has to be us who's taking note. But at the same time, let's say companies like, let's say Daraz or Design Collective, or let's say PR or Mimosa, Hamidias, obviously we as companies, we take very, very big measures to make sure that that security is involved. Because even when it comes to our servers, when it comes to, like, let's say the payment gateways that we're using, we always use very secure payment gateways. So try as much as possible, especially being from a country like Sri Lanka, try as much as possible to maybe do a double check if it is a website that you're not sure of. Even when, like, let's say you have these Instagram stores online and things like that, another very good way to kind of see these things is see what kind of reviews people have written. Review section kind of gives you a lot of information as well, because when people are pissed, they tend to write a lot of things in these reviews. When they're annoyed, they tend to like completely go crazy on these things. So it's very important to read these reviews, because in these reviews, you can understand what the product is like. You can understand what kind of, like, you know, what kind of brand it is and so on. So I would say those are my options.
Yeah, I think that's a very good message. So I think that's all. So that would be the end of the Q&A session. Thank you so much, Ms. Binu, for clarifying all those questions and doubts. Those clarifications will be truly supportive, I think. So now I'm coming to you, Ms. Binu. If you are to give a final motivational message to all those young entrepreneurs who are looking forward to step into the fashion industry in Sri Lanka, what you have to say?
My advice, I think, is very simple. Follow your dreams. The fashion industry is a place where dreams can actually come true. It's a place where creativity is given a chance to shine. Be as creative as you can, but keeping in mind that whatever said and done, you have to sell these products to someone. That is, I think, my final message. So be creative and be innovative, but keep in mind that you need to go along with your consumer.
Thank you so much, Ms. Binu, for that inspirational message. I think it will motivate all those young entrepreneurs who are willing to enter into the fashion industry in near future. So, Ms. Binu, thank you so much once again for that enlightening speech. We are truly grateful to you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to join us with Fashionomy. And thank you so much for supporting us with your presence. Your presence added glamour to this beautiful evening. And lastly, thank you so much for all the participants who joined with us to make this a success. I hope you all had a productive and a wonderful evening. So it is time to wrap things up for the third webinar of Fashionomy. Stay tuned until we meet again with the next webinar of Fashionomy. I wish you all good luck and have a good night.